At the end of Demon Rush Chapter 11, Rush met with Karner, who took him back to Earth to meet with the Black Hand, a mysterious group of villains who apparently have discovered information on something called the Grand Compendium, a relic that could change everything in evil's favor. And Karner simply leaves Rush to it with an eerie smile. He says, "I have other orders to attend to." And that's when Rush realizes the Black Hand are the ones that killed his father. So we're going to start this chapter 12 with a backflash into Rush's origin story, essentially like his family life, and try to learn more about what his ailments are, where his personality comes from, and so forth. And you can see that he's playing soccer, he's got some nice parents that are cheering him on, and it seems like his childhood life maybe wasn't so bad. But as we flip the page, we go from light to dark, a stark contrast where here the father is beating his mother, or at least he just punched her. So you can tell that a few years have passed, Rush has grown up a little bit, and it's at this point that Rush, starting to become a man, attempts to stand up to his father for the first time. He elbows his father in the chest, trying to get him away from his mother, and this took his father by surprise. But his reaction is force. He grabs Rush by the face and literally chucks him across the room. Rush gets thrown back by his father, and as he recovers, he picks up a knife. Crying tears from his eyes, he points the knife towards his father. And it's at this point his father, Leo, we'll learn his name here in just a little bit, kind of realizes what he's doing. The sight of his child holding a weapon towards him kind of shocked him back into reality. Marriage is tough, having a family is even tougher, and it appears that his father just kind of had a moment where he snapped, or this may have been an ongoing thing, but the sight of his son ready to kill him kind of made him realize in that moment that he is out of control. Rush's mother has a degenerative disease called Friedreich ataxia, which damages the nerves and the spine and the brain, and it's eventually fatal. It's kind of like a slow, painful death. The treatment for it costs as much as a house per year, and as Rush states, we don't even own a house. So he's letting you know he's got an abusive father, he's poor, and his life and family are crumbling. My father couldn't handle the financial burden, living a life in insurmountable debt in order to keep his mother alive. Although he never said it, you could tell he was full of resentment, and he took off. He was a coward, and I didn't want my mother to die. So the father became so strung out, trying to make enough money to take care of the family and the mother, that he just couldn't take it. He just broke, he snapped, and he left. Rush thinks that he can make the money necessary if he becomes a professional athlete, and he thinks he can make that money in soccer. So he starts to practice and starts working harder than anything he's ever done in his entire life. After 3 years, he becomes the youngest player on varsity. I just love this image here from Pedro. Like, it's Rush kicking a soccer ball, but like, holy crap, does this look cool. So the dad disappeared for a few years, and Rush has been playing soccer. His mom is still cheering him on, and he's grown up a little bit. He's gotten exceptionally good, and things are actually starting to look up a little bit now with his father out of the picture. The stress has left the home, and even though it's just him and his mom, it's seemingly enjoyable, and he's starting to have somewhat of a life. But unfortunately, things take a dark turn as mom's ice cream falls and mom herself begins to drop to the ground. The disease has taken its toll on her and kind of really kicked in its acceleration, which is what happens with degenerative diseases. He was out of money and time, and his only option was to call his father, for help. Rush is in the hospital with his mom, and that's when his father returns. After 3 years just disappearing without a phone call, he's back, but he's different. He's cleaned up. He looks different. He smells different. He apologizes to Rush's mom, Hannah, for not being there for her. And as she's crying, she's like, "Well, you're here now. That's what matters." And he drops to his knees crying as he holds her hands, and he tells her that he finally figured out a way to pay for her treatment. This is suspicious, knowing him kind of being like a deadbeat dad, and after disappearing for 3 years, now all of a sudden he wants to help. So Rush is curious, and he's become the man of the household, so he's going to follow his father and figure out what the hell's really going on. And as Rush states, he followed him that night to the parking lot where a group of strange men were waiting for him. He seemed nervous, like he didn't want to get in that car. Around that time, there were reports on the news about ritualistic killings in town. The police thought it was a deranged serial killer. And then you can see this dead body with the black hand and the silhouette. The dead body is in some sort of ritual pentagram, and it makes sense to Rush that the black hand were connected. It appears that Rush's father, in desperation, had joined them and started doing evil things in order to acquire money to pay for the mother's treatment. But the police came to the door. There was another killing in town. This time, the victim was Dad. My father was a piece of crap, but nobody deserves a death like that. A satanic ritual killing. He did keep his word, though. His life insurance policy paid for 2 years of Mom's treatment. She was able to recover for a while, and we started to move on. However, recently, the symptoms returned once again. So now we go back to 18-year-old Rush, which, keep in mind, is still not really present day. I mean, all of this is essentially flashback. Present day Demon Rush, Soren and Rush are 25 years old, so all this 18-year-old stuff you're witnessing is essentially their origin stories, just FYI. But Rush is here, standing in front of the Black Hand, the men who got his father killed and tore his family apart. And emotions are flowing through him like crazy right now. He wants to attack, but these guys are friends of Karner, and they're probably extremely strong. One of them butts his way in and says, "I'm not sure what Lord Karner sees in you. You're just a kid." And Rush can feel the power of their Imperium. These guys are not weaklings. As Oz stated to Soren, the more your Imperium grows, the more you will begin to notice strange things, and this is one of them. Rush is beginning to be able to feel the Imperium of opponents just simply by their spiritual pressure. But that's kind of crude, because this guy says, "Let's see what you got," and he uses an ability called Potentia Gradu. After casting the spell and waving his hand, Rush notices something strange happening to his body. And what's happening is the Black Hand member who used this ability is able to read his Imperium limit and see what his exact strength is. Think of it like a scouter in Dragon Ball. You know, I'm a Dragon Ball fan. Definitely put it in there. And I'm going to continue to do it throughout the series. We all love the whole scouter power level scale because it gave us clear indications as to like how strong the characters were. And I feel like Dragon Ball started to fall off a little bit once they got rid of that. Maybe not the Cell Saga, but it used to be important, and fans have tried to theorize forever how high people's power levels are at this current point. But in the honor of old school Dragon Ball Z, I put it in here. I like it. I think a lot of you guys will like that too. So one of the members, Bazin, he pulls down his glasses. He's like, "Hey, you look familiar." And Rush is like, "Uh-oh, this isn't good." And one of them knows it. He looks just like Leo Cohen. And Bazin laughs. He's like, "That chicken shits, kid?" This triggers Rush big time. It just, all his emotions just pop, and he charges in with a punch, yelling, "You effing tore my family apart." And he was trying to hold himself back because he knew he's outmatched. It's 5 versus 1, and they're stronger than him seemingly. He throws his punch, comes right into the guy's eye, and it lands. But unfortunately for Rush, Bazin just activated a spell called Petra Armis, which creates this sort of rock armor around his body. And that's gonna mash up Rush's hand pretty bad. He's not gonna like that. You see him screaming in pain as his hand just got completely jacked up, and he kind of jumps back, and now he grabs his sword with the other hand. I love this shot here of Rush. I don't know why. It's a small panel, but I just love the way Pedro draws the facial expressions. So Rush pulls out the sword. He's one-armed now, and he's just like, screw it. These guys killed my father, tore my family apart. I'm going all in. I give no Fs. But another one uses another spell called Akkus, which means essentially lose balance. This flings Rush down to the floor quickly. He loses his balance. Something like vacuums him to the floor, and he just smashes down on his face. And they're standing over him, and they're like, "Yo, chill out, kid. We're your escort, not your enemy." So Rush went into to attack, but these guys are essentially servants of Karner. They're not here to kill Rush, although it may have seemed that way, but it also seems like Karner, with that evil grin at the end of last chapter, knew what these guys did with Rush's father, and that's why he's sending Rush to meet up with them, to give Rush a crazy challenge so he can power up. And Bosin says that each member of the Black Hand has an Imperium limit of over 50, but their boss Baron has over 100. So the big guy in the back is the boss, and he says to Rush as he's kind of looking down on him, curious, your father abandoned you and deserted the Black Hand, like you're just some weak kid of a coward, but no matter what, it doesn't matter to us really, it's of no consequence. Our orders from Karner are to escort you to our contact, that's all we really care about. Rush like snaps, he's like, no consequence, my father died because of you assholes. And another Black Hand who's smoking says that idiot staged his death, and he thought he wouldn't notice, essentially telling Rush that his father staged his death in order to escape the Black Hand and I guess get that juicy life insurance policy. And he did so by smashing a homeless guy's head in and leaving his wallet. Alex says your father didn't have what it takes. Do you? And then the final panel of the chapter is Baron saying, come, it's time to meet the big guy. So whoever this contact is of theirs is the big guy. So as much of a challenge as these Black Hand guys may be, there is someone giving them orders, which we're going to meet in the next chapter. So I hope this gave you some good insight into some of Rush's motivations and life. He's had a very hard life. He's got a lot to prove, but he's not really strong enough to change the world yet. But it seems like he's on the right path. What is this grand compendium? Who is the big guy? We'll find out in the next chapter.